Well, Bob Kerrey is a former Democratic governor. He's also a former senator in Nebraska. He's also a war hero. Don Imus caught up with him on all of these issues. But he did get Kerry to talk about what could be flaws in the current version of financial reform.
This bill should not provide any guarantee that you're too big to fail. I mean, you just got to make it very clear that next time around, you boys put your money on the line, you put too much leverage, you make a bet, and you lose that bet, you're going down. We're not going to put a couple $100 billion in your pocket to keep you alive. So I think that it's likely the president's going to get a bill on his desk. I think the procedural vote on Monday is probably going to go in the Democrats' favor. But anytime you got a situation where a mob is chasing politicians, you got to beware that maybe the mob's wrong.
Of course, I keep thinking no matter what they do, it's going to be like peace in the Middle East. It's just not ever going to happen. I mean, for example, Goldman's defense of the charges of the SEC involving this whole derivative thing and this whole is that they didn't have an obligation to be honest with their customers.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, that's part of the problem. Every time I hear these guys talk, I think, you know, I understand you're saying it wasn't against the law, but is that your standard? If lying isn't against the law, that's okay. I mean, if it's at some point, don't you have to hold yourself to the same standard as your customer? You don't want your customer. If your customer lies to you, you raise hell about it.
I found that very powerful because listen to what he said in the end here. Whether you break the law or not. So if the appearance of your behavior just isn't good, then the government has a right to pounce. That's a little weird in and of itself, but that is the thinking going on in this great debate right now. With me are Jonathan Honig and Lizzie McDonald. We've got Tom Belesis back with us, Mike Norman. Tom, what do you think of that? That's a very important point. You have someone like Kerry, who's respected in the Democratic Party, sure, saying illegality needn't be the issue.
I mean, at the end of the day, as I said before, I'm all for regulation, but it has to be intelligent regulation. We have to prevent the gambling of assets, such as bank deposits, by firms such as Goldman Sachs, to trade in a way of heads, I win, tails, I lose. But when you win, you get huge profits and bonuses, and if you lose, it's someone else's problem. That we cannot have. I mean, that's a complete no-no. And I do agree with a lot of what they're saying, but again, we don't want to hamstring our financial institution to a way where we can't be competitive across the world. It cannot happen.
But why not then just prohibit bailouts? Say, all right, no more bailouts. Every company, you're on your own. That's not what this reform does. This reform controls behavior. It tells the banks how to act, how they should lend, how they should conduct their businesses. It's more shackles on the economy. And it's funny, Neil, the president loves to blame greed for causing the financial collapse. You know, we've had greed for a long time. It took Congress to create Freddie and Fannie and all the institutional elements that brought the economy to its knees.
Well, you know, and I'm not even, as I was with the prior guest, John, I'm not going to go into the blame game here, but it's that point that Kerry mentioned with Don Imus that so sticks in my head, Lizzie, where he's saying, you know, if the appearance of what you're doing isn't right, it just doesn't feel right, taking advantage of your customers, you might not be doing anything illegal. And it's a valid point, but it is reason enough for the government to pounce on you. And, you know, that, however you feel about it, gets to be open season.
Yeah, because I mean, Goldman, even Lloyd Blankfein said before Congress in January that some of the behavior during the bubble years was inappropriate. And he said, you know, basically, as we stand between trades, we don't have a fiduciary responsibility, but still the behavior was inappropriate. But Neil, what you see time and again is with this administration is their modus operandi, just with health reform, is to just shut down the other side of the debate and call them cynical or bogus or, you know, not having any decent fixes to the system. We've been talking about reform of Wall Street since 1985. And so, you know, but that's what you saw today with the president's speech. Shut down the other side who has legitimate points about the $50 billion, you know, bailout fund that Wall Street had to pay for, and how it will be levied.
Even when they've paid all their money back. I mean, now they go into another fund.
So, and also, how will it be assessed on liabilities?
Mike, what do you think of that? What do you think of that?
First of all, I don't think that was what Kerry was alluding to. I'm sorry. I don't think it was like, oh, we are not really that comfortable with what you're doing. Look, if you're going to tank the whole economy what you're doing might not be deemed illegal, but if you put the entire economy at risk, yes,
but,
we have to do it.
Be careful what you're saying there. What you're saying there.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious because we almost went down.
Very easy to judge after the fact, my friend. But if you are conditioning whatever action we take in reform based on what someone in government thinks could be deleterious, think of that. Think of that.
They call the shots. In other words, they see what the shot is.
They decide what is risk.
But Neil,
they decide what is risk.
Well, because, Neil, banks are quasi-governmental agencies. They have assets that are, their deposits are guaranteed. Their assets are right. Tommy's right. You shouldn't be able to gamble.
We're all going to be back at the end, but it is the end of the world as we know it. When we come back... Well, if you don't play, you pay. About 4 million Americans could be paying a lot if they failed to get health insurance. The Congressional Budget Office estimates up to $1,000 each by 2016 when health care kicks in. Big penalty, and I hear Johnny Honig tell it. Big tax. What do you think, John?
Well, Neil, it is a tax. I mean, it's kind of like you can call it a tomato or a tomato, but a penalty from the government is a tax. You are forced to pay this sum. It's not like you bought a gun or bought a boat and, are required to get a license. This is a penalty. This is a tax that's required just for being alive. And a mandatory payment from the government, or penalty from the government, is a tax. And that's
Tom,
exactly what this health care reform is.
If you're paying $1,000 for not having it, is it a tax?
I mean, Jonathan is right. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, it's a tax. I mean, this administration will throw anything against the wall. It doesn't care who gets hit. I mean, he campaigned on the middle class, making sure they don't get taxed.
You weren't invited to the president's thing.
Now all of a sudden...
You're going to be a big movie star, but you don't get invited to the reunion. Like, whoa. All right. Mike, what do you make of that?
Well, I'm actually going to agree with Honig on this one. I think it's dumb. I think the plan, you give $1 trillion to health care companies, okay, and you mandate, I mean, where is the subsidy for people? You mandate that people have to have health insurance, but it's not being paid for. So, I mean, it's a very unfair structure. I don't see the economic sense in all of it.
But if you pay more money to government, Lizzie, whatever you call it, you're paying more money to government.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm going to use a word, and you're going to make fun of me, but they are fiscal dipsomaniacs down there in Washington, and their version of reform is taxation.
This woman got a 1,600 on her SAT.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
I got a 16.
No, I did not get a 1,600.
Continue with your big words.
But 25 or 27 taxes already passed. I'd call this a tax, too. $670 billion is going to be raised in the next 10 years.
Can you go through the charade here, Thomas, saying you're not hiking taxes on anyone but the rich? When we know these fees are coming, and come on.
I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to tax whoever they have to tax to pay for this. Doesn't matter who gets hit. The middle class, the lowest income earners, the rich, whatever it is. But the bottom line is as follows. In my opinion, I view this as a Ponzi scheme to the fact where you're going to charge the younger people to pay for the elder people. I mean, it's unbelievable, Neil.
Well, you don't have to tax. You shouldn't raise tax at all. We don't raise tax to increase the budget of the Defense Department, but we deem the Defense Department national security as being something as a priority.
What do you think of that, Jonathan?
And of course, it's a tax at the end of the day because, Neil, there's no way to opt out. Even if you said, I don't want any part of the national safety net. If I'm dying on the street, don't bring me to an emergency room. There's no way to choose not to participate in this program. Trade is voluntary.
Jonathan, if you were dying on the street, I would bring you to the emergency room. I would stop by a bar, but I would definitely make sure you were here. Guys, thank you all very, very much. Tom, good luck. He's going to be in Wall Street, too. We're looking forward to that.
Thank you.
When does that come out?
May in Cannes in September.
Oh, in Cannes. David Asman, now.